Hello everyone, welcome to the Sky Sports F1 podcast with me, Matt Baker. We've had all the car launches now. Bahrain testing is just a few days away, so we thought we'd chew the fat of the winter break. And I'm joined by Simon Lazenby, Martin Brundle and Rachel Brookes to help me do that. This has been a pretty busy off-season, hasn't it? One of the busiest you can remember, Martin?
Well, it's been wonderful in many respects, hasn't it? I was a bit concerned a few weeks ago when, Charles contracted for long term at Ferrari. We know that Lando and Oscar at McLaren long term, George at Mercedes, presumably Max Verstappen says he'll finish his career at Red Bull. It all looked a bit static to me, and I think, where's the story? For the first time in the history of Formula One, we go into a season with an identical driver lineup to the year before and all of that. The calendar, China coming back on after 5 years away is hardly Las Vegas arriving, is it, in terms of notoriety? And I thought, oh dear, where's the story going to be? These cars better be much closer together. And then Lewis comes up with this magic move to Ferrari.
Yeah, it's eventful, isn't it?
Definitely been eventful. Kept everyone on their toes.
Yeah.
Kept you guys on your toes. We did the show, of course, which is very good. The reaction show to the big news of Lewis. I'll tell you what I'll do. You alluded to a couple of events there, Martin. I thought I'd just go through all the things that have happened across the off-season, and then we'll go in and talk about a few of those key moments. So we had, obviously, Lewis leaving Mercedes to go to Ferrari at the end of the season. We've got Andretti having their bid to join F1 rejected. Günther Steiner has gone from Haas. Sauber, a called Stake F1 team, kick Sauber, but not at every race. Certain races they're not due to gambling laws. We've got the Madrid Grand Prix in 2026. Silverstone is going to stay on the calendar until 2034. The sprint weekend format has changed. Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc have extended their contracts. And finally, Christian Horner, we know, is under investigation at Red Bull, fighting for his job. And because that's an ongoing investigation, we're not going to go into details on that. So it's all been rather busy. Perhaps the first place to start is the Lewis.
We're going to be a week. This is going to be a week.
Exhale there, Simon. Yeah.
No, I'm glad you wrote it all down.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember it all.
Well, just about. I probably missed something as well. So let's see. Right in. Tell me what I've missed. But look, let's start at the Lewis news to Ferrari. You guys, as I say, did that show. You reacted to it. The dust has settled a little bit. We've heard from Lewis at the car launches now already. He said that it's going to be emotional preparing for his final year at Team Mercedes. Do you think the reality is setting in for him?
I think the dust has settled now, hasn't it? And then you start thinking what the repercussions are for everybody else. And that's what you get with a move like this, which none of us were predicting. I was in a chip shop in Glasgow when I got rumours of the idea, you can imagine. And then we hurried back on the plane and came straight to the studio. We all kind of assembled like some sort of pathetic Avengers.
I was in the cold. I was in the cold while you were all in the warm. I'm going to throw this in.
Yeah, you did well. You did well, Rach. But we didn't. We just, none of us saw it coming, and that's the beauty of it. That it caught us all off guard, and I think already it started to ask questions of what might happen to those and the pressure it kind of puts on Charles Leclerc, because if he was the de facto leader and he's the golden boy, has been the golden boy of Ferrari for a number of years, all of a sudden you've now got this spectre of Lewis about to arrive. So can Carlos actually flip this situation on its head, put pressure early on Charles Leclerc, outshine him, and then put himself in that shop window for others? I wonder if he may even consider going back to Red Bull. And what for George now? I think Mercedes, and for him, they have a really important first half of the season. I don't know what you two think, but if he can go toe-to-toe with Lewis, establish himself as a true number one, maybe they take a risk on Kimi Antonelli. If he doesn't, does that bring Fernando Alonso more into play? There's so many questions that have come of it, haven't there?
I wasn't surprised at Lewis's move. I was surprised at the timing of it, but I have always felt he would end up in Ferrari Red one day. Even when he was saying he wasn't going to, or he was going to stay at Mercedes, I just felt he was always going to do it. I've said it on some things before. And so I wasn't surprised at the move. I was surprised at the timing of it, obviously, but I think everyone was, even Mercedes was surprised at the timing of it coming out. Antonelli, yes, I agree. I think Antonelli could be the answer to that Mercedes seat, but he's still got a race in F2 this season. Let's see what happens there. And then if you don't pick him, is it worth getting Fernando for 1 year when the engine regulations are all going to change again in 2026? Or Who else do you put in that seat? At the moment, I mean, my tip would be Lando, but that's going to cost an awful lot of money to get him out of that McLaren contract, isn't it?
Not so sure.
No, well, exactly. He's signed on for a long time. It's going to cost a lot.
I got thinking about contracts, and Martin, I mean, imagine in your time in Formula One, I don't know how much value are contracts really worth. Lewis and George signed for 2 years in August of last year. Before the season's even started, Lewis has ended his 2-year contract early.
Because there was a clause in it. So where the teams are slightly disingenuous when they tell you about new contract signings, because they only tell you edited highlights that suit them. And clearly they forgot to mention that he had an exit clause, which he's chosen to take, as you say, very early indeed. But, the contracts I sign for myself and for other drivers I manage, like David Coulthard and Gary Paffett and people like that, and just stuff that people send me to look through. I mean, there are 100 pages, a Formula One contract with all the different elements that you need. But often there is an exit clause or a performance-related clause, which are really hard to write and really hard to sort of measure, as it were. But do you know what? I see everybody's got an opportunity here. I think George Russell has got the shiny confidence, the talent, the speed, the experience to pick up the mantle and be the #1 driver at Mercedes-Benz. I have no doubt about that at all. I think it'll energise Mercedes with losing Lewis, and it's an opportunity for them. Act in haste, repent at leisure. They can wait and see, as you say, how Kimi Antonelli goes. They've got Esteban Ocon, I suspect, if they want. They've got access to Carlos Sainz, maybe Fernando Alonso. They've got Mick Schumacher in their gang and any number of other drivers. So I think they'll see how this season goes. Why do they need to jump now? And then I think it'll energise Ferrari into, as you say, Charles Leclerc as well. And it'll certainly energise us lot watching it and talking about it. So I don't see really any downsides here. And I don't buy all of this. It's going to be emotional. We're leaving. Lewis is a winning machine. And that's what he wants to do. And it's a good contract. He's got to be paid a lot of money and he'll get a lot of love. And it will be one of the sport's biggest, global sport's biggest stories in 2025. So I just see positives all around.
Yeah, and there's an opportunity, isn't there, if we do look at this for 2025, where you have Max Verstappen in a Red Bull, you've got Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari, Fernando Alonso potentially in a Mercedes, or let's say it's George in a Mercedes and he stays at Aston, top 5 teams, and Lando in the McLaren.
In the last year of regulations, where it all gets close anyway.
I think we've always wanted to see, haven't we, Alonso, Verstappen, and Hamilton going toe-to-toe in the top 3 cars. And maybe there's an opportunity for that to happen.
Can we fast forward 2024 then and just get there, please?
But when we get to Silverstone 2025, will there be a sea of red T-shirts?
Great question.
In the grandstands? I think there will.
Yeah, orange and red. Don't go together well, do they?
No, it's going to be not very pretty to look at.
There's going to be a lot of merchandise sold for Ferrari, that's for sure. On the point about George Russell and the job he's got to do, Rachel, I don't know if you see it as a really critical beginning of the year for George. Martin, you said you've got no doubt he will and can be the #1 driver at that team, but he's got to hit the ground running, hasn't he, to quash those rumours and start controlling the narrative of how he's going to finish.
I think George and Lando have got very similar seasons this year. I think they both need to mould their teams around them. This is really important for both of them now. They've got to that point in their careers where they're no longer young coming in. They've got experience. They know the teams they're in. They need to really build these teams around them now and make them work for them and the way that get the car built the way they want to drive it. Lando's committed long term. George now sees an opportunity. They've got to really use this year as a massive stepping stone for themselves, I think.
And you've got this transition point where Lewis will stop being invited to meetings, will not understand what's going on with development of the car, in the simulator. And the team consciously, subconsciously will favour George. They've got to.
I was thinking about other jobs, right? So if
for you?
No, well, yeah. Look, depending on how this podcast goes.
Well, I was just thinking Matt Baker podcast.
I was thinking if you left a job, you might get a month's notice. Maybe you're senior, you get 3 months' notice. You get 6 months' notice. Essentially, Lewis Hamilton has given a year's notice, and I think a year is a really long time in anyone's working life. You can do all sorts of things in a year. Simon, how is he mentally gonna navigate that? And even the people around him, I'm thinking maybe he's late. I don't know what Lewis's timekeeping is like. Maybe he's late by an hour. Is everyone around him going to start going, oh, it's because he's going to Ferrari. His head's already in Ferrari. Does it create, by releasing the news in January, does it not create a bit of a problem later down the line? I don't know.
I once worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I gave a couple of days' notice.
Did you?
Tough couple of days.
What, to go to McDonald's?
Yeah, I was changing jobs. No. I don't know. I think the thing is with Lewis, it's an exceptional case, isn't it? It's at the end of the day, it's Lewis, and Lewis has brought everything to Mercedes. Therefore, they kind of do owe him a little bit. I think they owe him everything, really, and they probably owe him the respect that he deserves to treat him like the great champion that he is for the time that he has remaining at Mercedes. I think Martin's right, and he'll know more because he's been in, you've driven in the sport for a start, and you've been around it, and you know when they kind of switch off the information to the outgoing driver. But as far as he is concerned, again, I don't think it's going to be emotion. I don't think it's going to be anything to do with that. It's about, he'll get through the season. He'll know early on whether he's got a car to compete for the championship. And I think that could be the key. If he does, they'll have to rally round whoever's the best driver again, won't they?
I have no doubt he will give it absolutely everything he's got until the last lap of the last race in Abu Dhabi for Mercedes-Benz. He'll be wearing those overalls, holding that steering wheel, representing 1,500 people. If everybody's smart in that, and I think they are all very smart people, as you said, they've had such a wonderful relationship together, Hamilton, Mercedes-Benz and Toto and the team. I think they'll see it as a farewell tour. That's how I think they should and will treat it. And then wish him farewell and hope that he loses in a Ferrari.
I have a question, just a very simple question on what kind of things can Lewis take from Mercedes to Ferrari? Just give us an example of some of the types of data or information.
Processes, philosophies, how the car works, what he likes, where he likes to sit, and what he needs from a car to maximise his talents. And then he's got to integrate, and it's hard because I don't think he'll speak the language. He certainly won't speak the language and know the team like Charles Leclerc does. So you've got to go and find out where all the buttons are to press. And that's why I think Lewis will want to try to take a few people with him. But there'll be non-compete clauses where he can't really do that. But you really want to take some of your own gang with you when you go, so that you can hit the ground running. But I think he'll have such respect there anyway that if Lewis says, I want the back wheels put on the front, they'll go straight away.
I wanted to ask you about that because I feel like Ferrari in recent years has changed a lot. When Seb went there, for example, it was very much live in Italy, speak the language, learn the language so you can communicate. And it feels like it's changed a little bit over the last few years, and that actually they don't necessarily need to embed themselves in Italy and Maranello anymore, and they don't necessarily need to speak the language. Is that the case, or do you think still that's at the heart of it?
I think it's still the case. I think if Lewis wants to do... So how could this go for Lewis? He could either do a Michael Schumacher and turn them into champions again, or he could do a Fernando Alonso and a Seb Vettel, where it's kind of a bit of a near miss, but look pretty good on occasions. And just look at what Schumacher did, the Schumacher Piazza we've been in and filmed, where Schumacher had his gym, where he stayed overnight, when he was always embedded in Fiorano, in the factory, like Leclerc and Sainz have done. So I think if Lewis really wants to get a fast start in what is a completely different team to the 7 British-based teams over there in Italy, I think he'll have to go and embed himself in it,
Yeah, I mean, but Fred had a tough start, didn't he? The first 6 months into the job, he lost some key personnel in Ferrari. Sanchez went over to McLaren. Laura McKees, of course, has gone off, and a couple of key aero guys. So he's rebuilding this in his image, and I think he's rebuilding it with the help of John Elkann, who it seems like, when Ferrari F1 team isn't going too well, the chairman or whatever doesn't really, interfere. They just stay in the background a little bit. But he's been front and centre of this. And I wonder what assurances that Lewis has been given about 2026 and beyond, because if we go back and we think about his move from McLaren to Mercedes, he made it at the right time. We're a couple of years off the regulation changes, but let's not forget that this is a Ferrari that won a race, the only car to have not won a race last year. They when you look at the launch spec cars this year, they're the only ones with regards to the rear suspension that have got this pull rod and they've gone their own direction on it. Mercedes themselves have moved to the same kind of suspension setup that Red Bull have gone, and most of the cars have gone that way. So you hope for his sake that they haven't gone down a kind of engineering cul-de-sac, and perhaps proof will be in the racing. So I think he's risking a lot, but you know full well that he will be absolutely incredibly well briefed as to their plans for the future. And yeah, I think the key here is, can he do a Schumacher?
I love it when you talk technical.
I wasn't talking technical.
Me too.
I wasn't.
I could sit and listen to you for hours.
It can seem extremely strange, but you know me an aero.
Very good, Simon. Very good. And yeah, look, one of the great stories well, I mean, where does that rank? That is one of the most brilliant stories we've had in Formula One for many years. And it, as you said, Martin, it just elevates the next couple of years, doesn't it? It just makes them so much more interesting than they were already due to be. Right. I think that's it for Lewis and moving to Ferrari. One of the other big stories that emerged, and this was actually just before the Lewis-Hamilton story broke, and that was Andretti having their bid rejected into moving into Formula One. It was approved by the FIA, but the entry for 25 and 26, F1 felt, would not add value. Andretti's reaction was that they strongly disagree and thought that an 11th team would add value, and they were devastated by the decision. So Martin, where does this leave Andretti and their quest to join Formula One, do you think?
Well, it's all been very quiet. Formula One put a 3-pager out that was very well written. Andretti came back a little bit, said we weren't aiming at 25, we did yet another new car for 2026. We were actually aiming at 2026, and we didn't get the invitation, got lost in spam or something like that, to go to the presentation in December, which seems all a little bit odd. I'm very surprised we haven't heard anything from the FIA or really from Andretti since that decision was made. I would personally like to see an 11th and even a 12th team on the grid. It's another 2 team managers to speak to and another 4 drivers and 4 cars to look at. For example, if you have a massive first corner shunt somewhere and you lose 6 or 7 cars, you know. So I think the show could do with it. Nothing to do with Andretti in that respect. I understand why a lot of the teams in Formula One were like, no, we don't want to share the pie out anymore. We're quite happy with 20 cars. Our pit lane is full of all the things that go on in the pit lane, including hospitality and what have you, whether it's a Brad Pitt movie or whatever. So they say they didn't need it, and they think that Andretti with a customer engine won't really be bringing anything to Formula One. It'll take more than it will give. So whether they're regrouping quietly for antitrust laws or anti-competition laws in the EU or whatever, I don't know. But it all seems to have gone away very easily. Andretti's a massive name in America, of course, but I think Formula One mustn't be too confident. You've got to think a little bit longer term. And I give you, just a short while ago, Force India was about to collapse.
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody losing their jobs, the team at Silverstone evaporating, going broke. And that turned into the incredible investment that Lawrence Stroll has made and others at Aston Martin. And there are a number of other teams that were pretty shaky 4 or 5 years ago, let's be honest. And we're now sitting with this magnificent position we find ourselves in, where all the teams are solvent and doing good business and looking pretty professional. But let's not assume it's always going to stay. You know, that circle, what goes around comes around on that. So I think we need to think long and hard about having some more credible teams available.
Are we in a trade-off, Rachel, between people like Andretti proving they can add value to Formula One and Formula One saying, no, we're going to add value to you? It doesn't seem a very equitable, I don't know, it seems strange. How can they prove that they can add value? Is it data? I don't know. And
also to say, you know, that they won't be competitive. Well, we don't know if who's going to be competitive yet. We haven't even put a car on the track. You know, you don't know until then. Everyone wants to be involved in Formula One right now because it is growing so fast, and they've done a brilliant job at doing that. We've got to be careful that we don't turn that the other way, that we don't... We've got to make it seem as welcoming as it has been in recent years. And right now, it's a real shame not to have the team. As Martin said, you know, we make room for Brad Pitt's film to have garages. You know, that's not in question. That can't even be in the equation. Comments like that, you know, that you make the room. If the will is there, it will happen. So I think key to it is how do we create the will among the other teams in the paddock and among the F1 to have more teams on the grid? How do we create that? What are they looking for? What do they need? You know, you can't just say not going to be competitive because, you know, any one of the 10 teams already on the grid could turn up this year and not be competitive because they've gone down the wrong road. So it is a difficult position to be in, but this sport is growing all the time. And if we put a lid on it, you know, what do you then do? Do you say we don't want it to grow anymore? It's grown enough, thanks. No.
And Simon, from a fan perspective, we did a poll, didn't we? I can't for the life of me remember which race we did the poll at about Andretti, but fans want another team. Fans want more drivers, like you said, Martin, want more team principals to get to know. It seems like maybe fans aren't being listened to in that sense, possibly.
I think it's quite a delicate subject to talk about because I think it maybe plays into the future of the sport, the future of, you know, what Liberty want to do with it. And therefore, there's factors at play here that, as much as the fans might want it, ultimately it's a business, and the business is looking after it itself. You know, again, I don't think Andretti have gone away here. I think their silence speaks volumes, and I think that they're assessing their options about what their next steps are. I mean, I think, Martin, you've even been quoted as saying, I mean, Gene said it. You know, Haas don't want to sell up. They were here to race. They've now got a seat at the top table. They probably wouldn't get in now as they stand, because what are they offering? You know, if it comes to becoming a GM works team and that's what they need to do, that's potentially one option. Maybe they are assessing, you know, different routes to understand what position they're in terms of competition laws, etc., etc. But they are a storied name, and I think ultimately would add value. They've just got to prove that they can. So yeah, I think the fans, yes, we all sit the same. We'd all probably love to have 11 teams, so long as the value keeps going up like that. I think that's what perhaps the
F2 paddock would like another few more teams, wouldn't they? Well, we have 5 drivers. You should really potentially have had F1 seats this year. Weren't able to get seats. You know,
that's the other thing you've got to remember, isn't it? We don't want to see talent not getting into F1.
And ultimately, there is going to be talent not getting F1 seats over the next couple of years. Okay, that was Andretti. Amongst the other changes that we saw or news over the winter break, sprint weekends are going to change. So this is how...
I'm so happy.
Well, from a broadcasting point of view, it probably is going to be met with...
I couldn't follow them.
Yeah.
I got to Sunday, I was like, hang on, they qualified on Friday, and it was just... I always felt behind the 8 ball. You were brilliant. I always felt behind the 8 ball.
That's every weekend, every day in my house. But
let me just briefly explain how they've changed. So Fridays will now have FP1 as a mornings, or the first session. Then the second session will be the sprint shootout. Saturday, the first session will become the sprint race. Then we will change to qualifying for the race on Saturday afternoon, and then the sprint is normal. Sorry, the race is normal on a Sunday. I'm getting that wrong even just speaking about it. So it just means it's more chronological, isn't it?
Yeah.
It made such a mess of my notebook. It was so annoying.
Yeah. Time is chronological.
Time is chronological.
It only goes one way.
You're coming out with some brilliant lines today.
We can't go backwards.
I can tell you've had a holiday.
It was confusing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The disconnect between quali on a Friday when a lot of people were at work and couldn't watch it, and the race on a Sunday. And in the middle, we had all of this sort of action. But as always in Formula One, there are unintended consequences. And so have a sprint race on Saturday morning and then have a shunt or two in that, and then you're not ready for qualifying. So they're going to have to get ready to, maybe with a spare car, a spare chassis, more built up than the regulations currently allow. What happens to the Parc Fermé regulations? When will you go into Parc Fermé? And just the general workload of the teams, especially, I know we've only got 6 sprint races, but over a 24 race season. So there's a lot still to be clarified on that. But I think chronologically, it makes a lot more sense for us and for the fans. And don't confuse your audience. And I think the old system did confuse the audience. The drivers always say, well, we're not really interested in the sprint, we don't try. And then as soon as the lights go out, they drive hell for leather, don't they? And it's really quite exciting sometimes. So,
and then ask me in the pen where they're starting the next day, because they've forgotten about Friday as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it makes sense. It's just got to tidy up the details now of how it might work through the weekend, because it's a complex business.
Yeah, good for broadcasters, good for fans, I think, and maybe good for drivers as well. Helps them to see and yeah, it was very strange, wouldn't it? We were in the paddock and you'd be mentioning where they are and they'd be getting confused. They should know. should know. That makes sense. The other thing that was also agreed at that meeting that we're going to increase power units from 4 to 5 for the 24 and 25 seasons. I guess we all agree that that's a smart move. Going to 24 races this year just seems to make sense, don't you think?
Engine penalties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there were cases, weren't there, a couple of years ago where we almost had the whole grid moving back, and it feel like you've been over penalised at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't want to penalise anyone else in that field right now. If Max has got a dominant car again, let's not.
Let's move on to a look ahead to testing. We've just got a bit of time just to preview that, and look. Testing is 8 hours a day for 3 days. It's a lot of time on track. I'm sure we'll all be glued to all 8 hours each day. Oh, you'll be there. Very good. Very exciting.
Talking for 8 hours a day.
It's a long day for all involved, drivers, broadcasters, fans. But look, who are we most excited about learning more about at testing? Go on, Simon. Start with you. Who's on your radar for testing?
Well, I just go back to funnily enough, yes, I know it was talking about technical stuff, but isn't it interesting, Martin? Do you not think that? We thought it was going to happen, but most of the teams have gone towards Red Bull, it would seem, in what they're trying to do, apart from Ferrari.
Yeah, but I think Ferrari had a decent car and they understood their car towards the end of last year, and so did McLaren as well, I would say. Red Bull, obviously. I don't think we ever really saw Verstappen and Red Bull pushed truly to the limit when they were on form. I mean, Singapore was an outlier, but it's the law of diminishing returns, and your car's working well. How much better can you make it? Others can copy, can learn, can understand, and they always concertina with static regulations. So it's a question of how much. For example, we saw in the first half of last year when the Red Bull opened its DRS rear wing, it was just embarrassing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Remember, it was just sailing past like it was in a different formula, different championship. And the team started to edge some of that back again. They will have worked hard on DRS. They'll have worked hard on efficiency. What did Mercedes say about their car? They had a spiteful rear end, which I'm sure you can see a doctor about that. But now they have a reassuring rear end, they feel. But time will tell, and the stopwatch never lies in that respect. So I think there's absolutely no doubt that the driver's desires and needs and the understanding they have and all the things they did in last year's car that were hurried, they can, and they'll still develop it through the year. So I think when they start taking some fuel out, day 3, and the bits have all arrived, we know full well that the launchers are all livery launchers, basically, aren't they?
Alpine's was a real car.
Was it? But the juicy bits still don't go on the cars.
No, the really juicy bits.
No, half of them haven't even put any paint on the cars.
No, exactly.
No. It's going to be a championship
very black cars.
Black cars.
But go on. No, go on.
But anyway, so I think that they will be closer. Will they be close enough? They better be.
Yeah.
I just feel from the comments that have come out, a lot of teams have gone back a step in their cars in terms of last year they went down a certain route and they didn't have enough avenues to go off to develop the car. Lots of talk of bold, aggressive. One quote was, "We've changed everything but the steering wheel." I think the start of the season we could see a slow start in the first few races, but I think by the time we get to midway in the season it's going to be much, much closer and much fiercer because they've all decided to go back, apart from McLaren and Ferrari, to basics almost, to say, right, we have to give ourselves as much scope as possible here to develop this car. They're all talking about the development programme already at testing. We haven't done everything we wanted to yet. We've got loads to develop. And the other thing is, last year at testing, when Ted and I stood at the side of the track, you could see who was having issues. You could see the Aston was really quick. Even though we say don't read anything into testing, there are things you can read into it. There are things you can tell. And you also look at the faces of the mechanics and you see whether they're happy and how many are sneaking out for cigarettes, and that tells you an awful lot about how the testing's going for the team.
We do have to caveat this with we have not seen the Red Bull yet. That's the last one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's just, everything we say, we haven't seen the launch spec Red Bull. But,
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
But I think the teams know anyway, because they have all sorts of GPS analysis and sound analysis. They soon know who's running which fuel, who's running which boost, and and fuel levels and what have you. So we get towards the end and you ring a few mates up and go, right, what's the pecking order? They know pretty well. Even if the times at the end of the day don't say that, they all know who's sandbagging.
And
I say it every year, body language.
Yeah.
It's body language. Read the body language.
Become a body language expert at testing. But I was going to say, teams will have...
And the data.
teams of people looking at the data.
Data lies, Simon, data lies.
But just to clarify, teams are going to have teams of people looking at everyone else's car, aren't they? Across testing, trying to investigate what everyone is doing.
What's funny is I just wonder how much of a dull moment that was for Red Bull. If you go all the way back to Monaco last year, when the other teams got to see Checo, the underside, whether that was like a seminal moment and some of the most valuable photographs in recent years. We'll see.
Poor old Williams had a similar thing, and theirs looked like a tea tray, didn't they, compared to some supersonic thing underneath the Red Bull. But they got it together later on.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, look, all 3 days of testing are going to be live on Sky Sports F1 next Wednesday through to Friday. Then, just a week later, we've got the opening race of the 2024 season, the Bahrain Grand Prix. And we're going to be saying this a lot, but it's a Saturday race, not a Sunday. Saturday race. So practice on Thursday, quali on Friday, the race on Saturday. And it's going to be the same for Saudi Arabia as well. And of course, you can catch all of that across our coverage on Sky Sports F1. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Rachel. The next time we see you, we'll have seen cars on track.
Happy days.
Happy days. Happy days. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.